Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Liz Vodder. I'm a school psychologist in Fairfax County Public Schools. I am at Oakton High School and South Lakes High School. I've been in the county for about 8 years, and today we're really excited to talk with you about Dialectical Behavioral Therapy, which we'll often refer to as DBT, and how you can use these skills in your everyday interactions. I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Ms. Rachel Cherian, who's a school social worker in the county.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Cherian, and I'm the school social worker at Oakton High School. Been with FCPS since about 2002. Liz and I fell in love with DBT several years ago, probably mostly because we have seen the impact that it can have on a teen's life when they start using these skills. And when parents are able to walk alongside and help coach kids on the use of these skills and really understand the tools that DBT offers, we've really seen incredible changes in family relationships. So we're so excited to be able to share some of our experiences and knowledge with you about DBT, just because it's a fabulous way to make changes for your lives. So we hope that you find it to be as helpful as we do.
So today we're going to focus on three main objectives. The first one is defining DBT, and once we define it, kind of going into the four core components. So we have mindfulness, distress tolerance, then interpersonal effectiveness, and finally emotional regulation. And after we talk about all those skills, then we're going to give just really practical applications and ways that you can integrate these skills into your everyday situations. So what is dialectical behavior therapy? Well, for starters, it was founded by Dr. Marsha Linehan, who, when working with clients, she discovered that other therapies were just not as effective. The clients that she was working with were often highly emotionally reactive, and DBT is a therapy that focuses on crisis management skills. So she defines dialectical as the idea of the synthesis or integration of opposites. So as an example, I'm doing the best I can and I want to be doing better. So as a whole, DBT focuses on the kind of a main overarching dialect, and that is both acceptance and change.
So a lot of people ask us, what exactly is dialectic? And what does it mean to be dialectical in your thinking? So dialectical is moving away from that black and white thinking that our teens and even we ourselves get caught up in. It's the idea that what seems to be two opposing ideas can actually be true at the same time. So the truth and the concept of the glass is half empty and the glass is half full at the same time. So they seem to be in opposition to each other, and yet they're both absolute truths. So we, in dialectic, if you see here, we gave you some examples of some dialectics. So, for example, we want to be open and we want to maintain privacy about certain things in our lives. We want to master some things by ourselves and be able to feel confident, like, hey, I did this. And then there are times that we might need to ask for help. So it's that balance of two truths that seem to be opposing, but holding them to be together at the same time. So the four components of DBT are mindfulness, which is the practice of being fully aware and present in this one moment. Distress tolerance is that idea of how to tolerate pain and difficult situations without making the situations worse. And that's so important because there are so many difficulties and distressful situations that all of us get into in life, and we can't avoid them. We have to be able to build our ability to tolerate the pain of life sometimes, or actually many times in life. Interpersonal effectiveness are skills that help you to ask for what you want in relationships and in our interactions, and also the skills that help us say no to things that seem to be beyond our limits while maintaining our self-respect and also maintaining that relationship with the people that are important in our lives. Emotion regulation is the skills that help us to manage, regulate, and express your emotions appropriately. So I want to talk to you about the biosocial theory. Um, so it starts off where some kids and some people are just emotionally more sensitive than others. They are just hardwired that way. And when I talk about this to parents, they're like, oh, yeah, my child has from day one just been a more sensitive child. And they will tell me stories of their youngster as a toddler that they seem to be, as they say, sometimes like more clingy or more sensitive to things. And so they were this emotionally sensitive child. And they are in an environment that is invalidating. And it's not intentional that the environment is invalidating. We, as the adults in this child's life, actually tries to help them feel better. We try to comfort them. And we do that by saying things like, it's okay. And we try to reassure them saying, it's going to be okay. You're okay. You're okay. And then this youngster is left with this pervasive emotional dysregulation. It's this inner confusion of, I don't feel like things are okay, but everybody in the world tells me that it's okay. But how do I get the world to recognize that I'm not feeling like things are okay? So then they're left with, maybe I need to escalate my behaviors, or maybe I need to, escalate myself, or what do I need to do so that people seem to really get the feeling that I'm feeling that I'm not okay, that people appreciate that things are not okay. So the biosocial theory kind of takes this emotionally sensitive person, and it helps us to understand the framework that they're coming into these situations with.
In DBT, there's a big focus on the 3 states of mind. And so on the far left of the Venn diagram, you can see the reasonable mind. So in other words, this is very logic oriented, just the facts, ma'am, almost a rigidity to an approach to the situation. And on the right-hand side, you have the emotional mindset. So you're leading with emotion. You're making decisions from that emotional viewpoint. And wise mind, that's a huge goal of DBT, is to have all of us just kind of merge those two and take the strengths of reasonable mind and emotional mind to form that wise mind when making decisions. Because ultimately, using both logic and emotion to guide our thoughts and behaviors is ideal, and it's something we strive for. So kind of talking about the core competencies and diving right into mindfulness. So Rachel and I often have heard some, misconceptions about mindfulness, especially from students. We'll have misconceptions. Sometimes they'll say, well, mindfulness you're not really doing anything when you're doing mindfulness. You're just doing nothing, right? On the other hand, we've had, well, mindfulness, that's just meditation. That's all it is. So there's been a range, but really we wanted to kind of address mindfulness and give a broader viewpoint and a more kind of detailed explanation of what mindfulness can be. So when breaking down mindfulness, we look at a couple of skills. So let's focus on the what and the how skills. The how skill is, another way to say that is, you're being one mindfully. So in other words, you're sustaining attention on the present moment. It's actually the opposite of multitasking. And in our society, where we have so many demands put on us, and with the technology and everything just being, our attention is so divided, this can be a really challenging thing to do, is to just kind of step back and just focus on that one thing that's, in front of us in the present moment. So mindfulness is all about being non-judgmental. As you're going through this, it can be, very common to have a thought and then your thought to drift into something else. And then, that non-judgmental piece is to just acknowledge that thought and say, okay, my mind wandered, and to kind of guide yourself back to that present moment. The what skill is you're going to observe what's happening in a situation first, and then you're going to then figure out, how are you feeling in that situation? What's going on in your body? For example, you might feel that your heart rate is really increasing. It's getting faster. Your fists may be clenching, right? All those physical symptoms of your body. And then you describe that to yourself and what's going on. And by describing it to yourself, you actually allow yourself to be able to participate in what's going on. And you bring almost an awareness to the moment so that you can be more effective really in handling the situation. So essentially, when practicing mindfulness, you're going to observe your body reactions, what's happening in your thoughts, and then taking that information and then acting on the situations. A lot of times we're not aware of our own anxieties and how this can unknowingly have a negative impact on a situation. Sometimes it can even make the situation worse. So mindfulness is just a great way to be getting in touch with how we're viewing situations and what we're experiencing of the world around us. Mindfulness can certainly be a daily practice. It's something Rachel and I highly encourage, that it can be incorporated into our routine. And while mindfulness can work in crisis situations, it's often best to practice mindfulness in non-crisis situations so that your body is used to it and can much easily transition when you're in a situation that's, highly volatile. So really practicing mindfulness and all those skills we're going to talk about is best in that, non-crisis mentality or situation. So our second core competency is distress tolerance. So we have a little clip here that you can watch on your own time. Rachel and I love talking about this video. If you're familiar with The Big Bang Theory, it features Sheldon Cooper, who's one of the main characters. And this clip really hits on the topic of willingness. However, Sheldon has a really hard time with it. And, the reason he does is he kind of gets stuck on, what in his mind, what is right. And he has trouble shifting. So willingness, really, instead of what Sheldon's doing, it's being open to doing something. It's being available for this new experience. And we often like to pose to the students when we work with them, and we'll pose it here today. Is it better to be right or to be effective? In the video clip, Sheldon does a great job of not being able to move the situation forward. And, in situations where people are coming from different viewpoints, there's a way to approach it that it's, in order to take a step forward or make progress, you are balancing those two and trying to, be effective versus being right. This leads really naturally into radical acceptance. So radical acceptance is the concept of fully accepting something. As adults, we feel like we need to fix or change something, especially in situations with our families. And in reality, instead of doing that, which is the natural inclination, it can be to just start with the sheer fact of just accepting something. We like to make the distinction, of course, that if you accept something, it doesn't necessarily mean you agree with it. And once kind of having that knowledge and understanding of it, it takes that emotional burden off of you of feeling like you have to get somebody to see your point of view or to agree with something. You can fully not agree with it and just accept it. Turning the mind is a skill, and we'd like to kind of highlight here that turning the mind can be a process. It's something we just don't do once and we're done. It's something that we're in a situation that we observe what's going on. We make that inner commitment to ourselves to do it again, and then develop a plan, to continue on with the practice. It's very natural for us to drift in and out of that acceptance, and that's okay. It's the idea that you have to kind of keep working at it and, make the decision to keep doing it. So essentially, us continuing to do it essentially is us turning the mind in that situation.
So let's talk about interpersonal effectiveness. These are really those skills that help us to strengthen relationships that we want to hold on to, and then let go of relationships that we may not want to hold on to. We want to highlight three major aspects of interpersonal effectiveness. The first one is give fast. Give fast is the skill that you use when you want to say no to something or deny a request. So that would be the give skill, which is the manner in which you're going to approach saying no. So give, the G stands for being gentle, having a gentle manner and a tone of voice when we are speaking to somebody. And we are going to be, for the I, being interested in what the other person has to say in this conversation. The V is for validate, which is that we are going to validate the other person's perspective. We don't have to agree again, we just have to accept that. And then the E is for having an easygoing manner during this conversation, just to keep things going and flow in the conversation. And now we move to the fast. The fast is where we are being fair in the conversation, both to yourself and to the other person. We're also going to not over apologize. So that A stands for the apologies. That means that sometimes when we say no to somebody, we say, oh, I'm so sorry, but I can't do that. Here, we just want you to say no, because there's a reason for why you say no. You don't have to apologize for that. And then stick to your values as you say no. And then T is to be truthful as you are saying what you need to say in that no statement or denying that request. The dear man skill is the skill that you use when you want to ask for something. So it could be like the situation that you want to ask your child to clean their room. It's a great time to use your dear man skill. So the D is to describe. So you're going to describe what you see, sticking just to the facts. I see that your room really looks very messy. It's starting to smell really bad in there. There are lots of piles of clothes on the floor. You're not putting in your opinions, anything that's subjective. It's just factually describing something. E is express, expressing that it's smelling bad, expressing that it's really hard for you to walk by there because that smell might be filtering into the rest of the house, or whatever that E is in terms of like expressing what's going on here. The A is for assert, and the assert is that's where you ask for what you need. So the assert is, I really need you to clean up the room and take the time to clean up, put away your laundry and do some laundry. And then reinforce is the R, where you're going to reinforce why it matters to you. It would really mean a lot to me if you could clean your room. That way I don't have to feel anxious every time I walk by your room. And I think it would really help you also to be able to find your things, and you could get a handle on what's dirty, what's clean, and you have more clothes to wear. The man aspect of Dear Man is the manner in which you'll do this. So the M is, again, to stay mindful in your requests. So that means you're going to be in this moment, in this request. You're not going to bring up the 50 times you've already asked them to maybe clean up their room. You don't want to be saying, I've already asked you 50 times. That's not going to be effective. You want to stay in this moment, in this request. And the A is for appearing confident. So you want to go in and strongly state your wish. You don't want to be saying, please clean up your room. I've been asking you and asking you. That's not going to be effective. And then the N is for negotiate. So be willing to negotiate and hear what the other person is expressing. So for example, if your child tells you, I hear you, Mom, that my room is messy. I know I need to clean it up, but I have this big biology exam coming up, and I really need to focus my time and efforts on getting myself prepared for this test. So here you might want to be willing to negotiate, and your negotiation might be, okay, maybe this is really important. I know you need to study for that. As soon as this test is over, I need you to focus some time on cleaning your room, whatever that time is. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 10 hours. So just be willing to negotiate to what that other person is expressing. And then the validation skill is so important, and you will hear us talk about it again and again and again throughout our conversation. We'll go more into this in a little bit. Validation is really our bread and butter. We all feel so much more appreciated when we are validated. So we'll talk more about this later on. So let's talk about the skill of emotion regulation. This is the ability to regulate and express your emotions. And we're going to talk about a few of those emotion regulation skills. There are several more. The first one that I want to talk about with you is the stop skill. And the stop is, the S is to literally just stop what you're doing. And you're going to do this when you really feel like you're escalating yourself. So you can like look at this situation, and sometimes we get into these situations where our teen is so like triggered and activated and escalating. And then that gets your anxiety going. And so you can start like, you're like matching them, for everything. So here you're realizing, oh, this is going down a road I don't want to go down. So you literally stop. You take a deep breath and take a step back. So the T is to take a step back. And literally, we tell people to take that step back, because sometimes when the situation gets heated, we sort of lean in. So lean back, take a step back. For observe. Observe, what am I thinking here? What am I feeling? What am I really reacting to? And then, is this about me? Is this about my teen? What's the situation? And then the P is for proceeding mindfully. So again, this comes back to, is it more important to be right, or is it more important to be effective? That's what that P in the stop skill is standing for. As we go through DBT, there's a lot of acronyms. That's sort of what DBT is known for. So you'll find a lot of these acronyms keep on coming up. Opposite action is that skill where you're going to do the opposite of what your impulse might be. So you're going to use opposite action when the emotion doesn't fit the facts of the situation. So for example, your child has a big test to study for, and their emotion action urge, because they're feeling so anxious about this test, their urge is to pull the covers over them and hide in their bed. And yet we know that that would not really be effective. It wouldn't help them meet their goal of wanting to pass this test or pass the class or to do well. So as much as their inclination may be to avoid and hide and not dealing with preparing, we want to encourage them to use the opposite action skill, which is doing the opposite of what you feel like you really want to do, because you know that's going to be more effective. And then we're going to talk about the ABC skill. The ABC, please. The A is for accumulating positive emotions. So that's like that skill, that idea of doing things that help you feel better. So if it's hanging out with your friends and doing some time with them to elevate your mood, then that's accumulating positive emotion. If it's taking a nice long hot shower to make yourself feel better, that's accumulating positive emotion. If it's going for a walk, whatever is those activities that we can all build into our day to make ourselves feel better and lift our mood. That's the A of ABC. The B is building mastery. We all feel so much better about ourselves when we've been able to master something. So if we can master calligraphy, or if we can master I don't know, playing the violin, whatever it is that we can build that mastery on, that would be something that helps elevate the mood. The C is for the idea of cope ahead. Um, Cope ahead means that we are imagining whatever is that stressful situation that might be coming up, right? And we are imagining and rehearsing coping through that situation. So, for example, I want to go in and ask my boss for a raise. And in my mind, I'm imagining the situation, imagining what he or she might say, and imagining my own response to the situation. And then, what if my boss says no? How am I going to react? How am I going to cope with that situation? That's cope ahead. So the please aspect of ABC Please is really recognizing that mind body connection. The PL is treating physical illnesses. We do not do well with managing our emotions when we don't feel well. So treat whatever physical illnesses or whatever's going on physically for you. The E is balanced eating. And that's just knowing that, if you carb load to give yourself that comfort carb, that maybe you might crash afterwards. And that's not going to help you with regulating your emotions. The A stands for avoid. And that could be avoiding mood altering substances. It could also mean avoiding what isn't effective for you. So that means it could be avoiding, for us as adults, we even get pulled into that concept of spending too much time on our phones. Or for our teen and some adults too, it's maybe spending too much time playing video games. So those things could be not effective in getting things done that we need to get done. So, and it's also like avoiding. So it's avoiding. And then sometimes the A could stand for avoiding relationships that are not in our best interest. The S is for balanced sleep. And teens are always surprised when we tell them that they should have about 9 hours of sleep. And a lot of them tell us that they get about 5 hours of sleep. And I'm saying, then you're operating and you're trying to regulate your mood from a place where you're already sleep deprived. And that's going to impact your emotions and how you're able to regulate your emotions. So sleep is a huge aspect of being able to control your moods there. And then the E is exercise. Exercise really gives us that ability to feel better and lifts our moods after we can have a little bit of exercise every day.
All right, so we've talked about all 4 competencies of DBT, and now we wanted to shift focus and give a couple examples of using some of these skills in your interactions with your kids, and seeing if we can break down some of these skills that can be more applicable when you're trying to use them, and also helping your children understand them as well. So when looking at this visual, Rachel and I really liked this kind of the iceberg image and relating this to behavior. Because often when we see children react in a certain way, there's just the behavior. And it can be really hard and very tempting just to react to whatever the behavior is. And when Rachel referenced, the idea of taking that step back, this is not a perfect example of when looking at your child's behavior, looking underneath that surface of it and seeing that there's so much more driving that behavior. Are there needs not feeling like they're met? Emotionally, socially, physically, and there could be so much and even conflicting emotions driving their behavior. Also, their behavior cannot even be related to the situation at hand. It can actually be related to something that happened earlier in the day, and it's just ends up being, coming out at the end of the day when they're at home. So the idea is that there's so much beyond the surface of your child's behavior. And when thinking about it, behavior is a form of communication for your children. It's their way they're trying to let you know how they're doing, how they're feeling. And oftentimes they're not able to express it in that verbal manner. So this is how they're able to do it. So with their behavior, they're trying to communicate to us about how, your relationship is with them, what they're experiencing, their inner world, even, their peer relationships, what's going on there that maybe we necessarily didn't know about, and things going on at school. So it really helps us to dig deeper and empathize, with that pain that your child may be experiencing, which may be ultimately driving that behavior. So we're going to circle back to validate. And as Rachel said, this is really, a bread and butter. This is such an important concept here. And validate really does help us to feel appreciated. And as we talked about, validating is important. It doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with the situation. You can validate your child's experience. For example, with the biology test and having to clean the room. So you can say, to your child, I understand and I can imagine that this must feel stressful for you right now. By using phrases like that, you form that bridge. You help them to feel that they're not alone and that you are coming to from a place of understanding. And validating it's truly a big diffuser. It can really help de-escalate the situation in a much kind of a healthy and much quicker way of doing that. And once you have that bridge with your child of they're feeling like a place of being understood, you can start to make those forward steps into negotiating and figuring out a viable solution. So we've included this video. Again, this is, if you've watched the video of the couple with the woman who has the nail stuck in the middle of her head, and her partner is trying so desperately to fix and solve the situation. And in reality, what she really needs from him is for her to, to be listened to and to be validated. So again, if you want to watch that on your own time, we thought this was a great example. It can be really tempting to want to jump in and be the fixers for our children and wanting to solve their problems. And ultimately, the goal is hopefully being able to really empower them by helping them learn these DBT skills instead of you taking control and taking the reins and helping to jump in. That by them using these skills, it can really empower them to make their own decisions and be their own fixers. So ultimately, that is the goal, that we want to strive for.
Let's talk about walking the middle path. Walking that middle path is simply fighting that all or nothing thinking. So that way that we kind of can, all of us, our teens and ourselves, go into a situation with like, it's either my way or your way. And we're trying to kind of think about how we can say, I see my perspective and I see yours. Because the fact is there could be truth in both of those perspectives. So we want to, we talk a lot to our teens about perspective taking. And, they come to us and they're like, if only my parents understood what we were saying. And, if they understood my perspective. And I always respond to that statement with, well, what about the truth in their statement? There's truth there too. So it's helping them see their truth, but also helping them see a different truth. And that's so helpful, not just with, parent relationships, but also like working with whoever their boss might be, or a coach that they might be frustrated with, or even a teacher that they're really upset with. It's helping that perspective taking and understanding that there's more than one truth in a situation. I know a lot of times as adults, We want what's best for our kids, and we seem to think that we know better. And so, of course, they should do it the way that we tell them to do it. And I know that, like, before I sort of started walking down this road, I was very much an advice giver, fixer type of social worker. And then I realized that, that really was doing a disservice to the teens that I was working with, because I really don't have an idea of what it's like to be a teenager today in this TikTok world that our teens are living in, where their worth is really based on how many likes they get. And that's not something that I agree with. I just know that that's the perspective that they are trying to live in and trying to kind of come out of. So before we can make that change, we have to accept again. So walking the middle path is kind of seeing our truth, but their truth as well. Again, it's that idea of the glass is half full and half empty at the same time. So they're both true, but they're both true, and we need to see both of them. So a lot of people will say, "Oh, walking the middle path is seeing the grays in a situation." And I say, actually, it's not seeing the gray, because when we are looking at the gray, we sort of diffuse the black and the white, and they sort of blend, right? So with DBT, we're not seeing the gray. We're actually trying to help ourselves and our teens see more of a checkerboard. And in a checkerboard, we see both the black and white. They both remain completely black, and then they remain completely white. So the two truths exist, and they exist simultaneously. And that's what walking the middle path allows us to do. We're back to one of my favorite parts of DBT, which is this concept of having a non-judgmental stance or having a non-judgmental attitude. It is such an important part of helping us to see our teens' perspective. We don't have to, again, agree with what they're saying. We need to and I want to kind of highlight and caution you in this, that we don't want to validate them, in that we don't want to validate what's not valid. So when we are being non-judgmental and we're validating them and accepting what they're saying, be careful that you're validating only what's valid. So when I say that, that would be something like your child comes to you and says, "I can't go to school today. I'm feeling way too anxious." And so if you don't want to validate the invalid, where you're going to say, "Oh no, you're right. You can't go to school today." That would be kind of setting them up for not success, right? So the validation and the acceptance would be saying, "I see that you're really anxious and that you really want to stay home and be at home and avoid going to school." The second part of that would be observing consequences to making that choice. So if your teen said, "I can't go to school today," your response might be, I hear you. And then what would happen? That test is still going to be there when you go back to school tomorrow. Or that project or presentation still exists. And what would be the consequences for you making that choice to stay home today? Sometimes I can be very irreverent with our teenager and say, "How would that work for you if you chose to stay home? How's that working for you?" And kind of that irreverence, but that's done with respect. They kind of come back to that and say, "That really wouldn't work." Again, we want to not judge something as either good or as bad. We want to move away from evaluating things or behavior as like, that's good or that's bad, or you're being good or you're being bad. We want to be discriminating in a situation. discriminating, not evaluating. And this is really a confusing concept. I know I got really confused about it too when I was learning DBT, because our whole lives we're taught not to be discriminating, and rather to be evaluative about situations. However, in DBT, we're not discriminating against something, we're discriminating and kind of taking a deeper dive into the behavior, or into our thoughts, or into what our choices might be. So, for example, a judge or a lawyer might be able to discriminate whether some behavior was actually breaking the law. So, in that examination, they're discriminating, not evaluating.
As we wrap up today, we wanted to draw your attention to this quote. Dr. Linehan has so many wonderful quotes that illustrate these various skills, and we wanted to share one of them with you. And it says, sometimes we cannot change the environment significantly, but we can perhaps alter the way in which we perceive it. That goes back to the idea about the dialectic, the both acceptance and change. While we may find ourselves in environments and situations that we don't choose to be in, that we can't necessarily change, however, we can choose to change how we perceive that situation. We do have power over our reaction to it. And in turn, we have the power to be able to teach those skills to our children, that they can in turn know that they have the power to respond in a way that is not something that is just left to chance, that they have the ability to control how they respond.
I wanted to share some resources with you that both Liz and I have used. Both of us have taken a look at all of these books and in fact have used them ourselves. They are great resources for you to take a deeper dive into DBT. We hope that this presentation has given you some tools, and that it kind of taps your curiosity to say, you know what, this sounds like something I want to learn more about. If you are interested, here are some places to start your search.
Thank you again all so very much for joining us today. Rachel and I love talking about DBT, and hopefully we were able to convey that excitement through our discussion today. If you have any questions or would like to engage more in the discussion of these skills, our contact information can be found on this slide. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much for taking a listen. And, like Liz said, we love any opportunity to talk about DBT because we love it so much. So don't hesitate to reach out and ask us any questions if you have them. And we hope that this was helpful to you. Thanks so much.